The first thing that hit me was the smell. Expensive roses. Imported leather. That faint trace of lemon polish on furniture that hadn't been touched by human hands in years. I stood at the gates of my father's estate in Bel Air, the same gates that had once seemed larger than life when I was a kid, and now just felt like an expensive joke. The kind of place that made you feel small on purpose. I hadn't been back here in years. Not since the day I walked out and promised myself I wouldn't return unless he was dead. And here we were. Dad was gone. And yet, I was here, invited, summoned, dragged by obligation or maybe some last shred of curiosity. I stepped out of the car, heels hitting the stone like a gavel. Paparazzi lights flashed behind the hedges, like vultures pretending to be moths. I saw relatives I hadn't spoken to in decades, faces stretched tighter, suits darker, smiles faker. Everyone pretending this was about honoring a legacy, when we all knew it was about numbers and names on a page. Inside, the hall was colder than I remembered. A massive oil portrait of my father stared down from above the fireplace. Same smirk. Same eyes. That man had whispered a half-hearted "I'm sorry" before he took his last breath, then slipped away before I could even decide if I believed him. As I walked through the foyer, a few heads turned. Others whispered. I was the ghost in the room they'd rather forget. I didn't flinch. Caroline. That voice. Sweet as cyanide. Vespera. My older sister, wrapped in black silk and disdain. She didn't hug me, of course not. She just eyed me like I was a crack in the marble. You're actually here, she said, smiling like she wasn't already rehearsing my exit. I kept walking. We were ushered into the grand salon. Rows of chairs, a podium, cameras discreetly placed like ornaments. Lawyers with folders, assistants holding iPads. This wasn't just a will reading, it was a production. I took my seat near the back. That's where they'd put me. Always the afterthought. Always the seat filler. Renly caught my eye. My cousin, one of the few who ever treated me like I mattered. She gave me a nod. No smile, but it meant something. The lawyer began. My name is Richard Slane, executor of the estate of the late Mr. Alexander Harrow. I stopped breathing for a second when I heard his name out loud. $310 million. That's what it came down to. Asset by asset, name by name, Richard listed them off. Vespera this, Uncle Raymond that, trust funds, properties, stocks. The crowd murmured approvingly. There were no surprises until me. To Caroline Harrow, the lawyer paused, an item of sentimental value, to be disclosed privately. The room didn't gasp, but it inhaled. Collective judgment hung thick. Someone snorted. Sentimental? Vespera's voice echoed. Is that what we're calling pity now? I stood up. My voice didn't shake. Is that what you think this is? Pity? She turned. You haven't been here in years. You didn't even come to the hospital. And now you show up for what? Jewelry? An apology in a box? I came because I was invited. You came because you're desperate. She stepped forward. Her heels clicked like gunshots. I saw the look in her eyes. Mean. Clean. Practiced. Then she slapped me hard in front of 200 people. The air cracked. Everything went silent except for the sound of a phone falling from someone's hand. And someone muttered, she's live streaming. The lawyer's mouth hung open. Renly looked like she wanted to disappear. Vespera? She didn't look sorry. She looked victorious. My cheek stung, but my pride burned hotter. That's when it happened. The portrait behind me, our father's portrait, moved. Just slightly. A shift in the corner. A frame nudged, almost like it breathed. I turned, my heart in my throat. Someone in the crowd whispered, did you see that? An older woman near the fireplace muttered, he's not resting easy. Then I saw it, behind the canvas, hidden near the edge of the frame, a tiny black dot. A microphone recording. The room wasn't just being watched. It was being documented. For who? Why? Vespera's outburst. The cameras. The sudden invite. The sentimental inheritance. This wasn't a reading. This was a setup. My chest tightened. And I wasn't sure if I was the victim or the bait. I looked back at the crowd. Some were looking at me. Some were pretending not to. But all of them knew something had shifted. Then again, so did I. I remembered nights I'd spent in this mansion, forgotten, unseen. I remembered my father calling me into his study to tell me I was his favorite, but never daring to say it in public. I remembered skipping college applications to take care of him while Vespera took vacations. And I remembered never saying no until now. Now, the sting on my cheek was a trigger, not a warning. My eyes locked on the portrait. I could almost hear his voice. That apology I never got to answer. But this was my answer. I looked down. The will was being closed. But something had just opened. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence doesn't protect you, especially from your own family. No one moved. Not at first. The sound of Vespera's hand connecting with my cheek still echoed, even though it had long since faded. People froze, not out of shock for me, but because they didn't know how to react. They whispered to each other, eyes flicking toward phones, fumbling to check if the live stream was still going. Some offered Vespera a tissue, like she'd just had a breakdown. No one came to me. I stood there, burning inside, but I didn't let it show. I fixed the line of my dress, smoothed a strand of hair behind my ear, and gave the room a faint, practiced smile. That kind of smile you give when you're used to bleeding quietly. When you've been humiliated enough times, I told myself, you start mastering how to stand still. From the corner, a woman murmured, "She must have deserved it." The words floated through the room like perfume. Sweet, poisonous, and easy to inhale. I didn't flinch. I turned, chin lifted, and walked out, each step deliberate, knowing someone was filming my back. Later that evening, we were led into the dinner hall. A formal meal, post-ceremony, as if the public spectacle has just been the appetizer. Everything was polished, the table settings, the lighting, the forced pleasantries. Except this time, my seat was nowhere near the family. They placed me at a small table tucked near the restroom corridor, out of sight but not out of mind. Every clink of cutlery from the main table rang like mockery. Across the room, Vespera played the role of grieving daughter with ease, her voice just loud enough to float across the space. "It was such a hard moment I just couldn't hold it in," she said to a reporter, dabbing at dry eyes. I glanced at my reflection in the glass window beside me. The lighting above hit just right, making me look like a forgotten statue under a museum bulb. That seat placement wasn't accidental. My mother's hand was all over it. She hadn't even looked at me since the reading. Whispers started again. "Poor thing, wrong place, wrong time." I chewed slowly, swallowed the embarrassment, and told myself, this isn't about shame. This is about strategy. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from an exclusive society group. The hero slap was trending. Someone had uploaded the livestream clip. I tapped it. There I was, frozen in high definition, face turned slightly from the hit, eyes wide, silent. The video had no sound, just my stunned reaction. The caption? $310 million drama queen gets put in her place. There were comments. She had it coming. Should have stayed gone. Family Feud goes reality TV. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I locked it. Another buzz. A text from Renly, "Don't respond yet. Let them dig their own hole." I breathed deep. For the first time, silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like armor. I slipped out the side door, into the back garden. The laughter from inside echoed faintly, mixing with the soft drone of cicadas and distant silverware. Calm voices cut deeper than loud ones, my father had told me once. He said it with a smirk, probably thinking it applied to business meetings, not family disasters. I wandered deeper into the garden, near the old oak bench we used to avoid because of the bees. Tonight, it was empty. So was I. Then I saw him. The gardener. Same one from years ago. He didn't say anything. Just looked at me, then pressed something into my hand gently before walking away. A folded napkin. Maple leaf fold. Same as the one I used to leave at my father's breakfast tray when I was 13. He was the only one who ever noticed. That napkin, folded the same way, meant something. It meant someone had seen. Someone still saw. I returned to the hall after a while. Didn't want to, but I did. People noticed. Conversations dimmed. I didn't hide, I walked tall. Renly gave me a nod, but she didn't get up. Everyone else looked everywhere but at me. A woman from a lifestyle blog, the kind that faked empathy and published pain, approached me, smiling like we were old friends. "Can I quote you, Ms. Vale?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "Quote this: money can't buy dignity, but it sure pays for the audience. She blinked, unsure if it was a threat or a tagline. Word spread. Vespera's smile faltered across the room. For the first time that evening, I felt something click. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. I was underestimated. And that's where they messed up. As I walked toward the exit, cool air brushing my arms, I paused to glance up at the draped window above the stairs. A shadow moved behind it. Someone was watching. Then, my phone buzzed again. One message. No, Cinder. You weren't supposed to be at that table. I left the gala behind before midnight, walking down the long east wing of the estate, one of the corridors they locked after Dad passed. The old mahogany paneling reflected the moonlight, and I realized this place hasn't seen visitors in years. The air felt thick with memory. My footsteps echoed. I thought of all the times I tiptoed through here, maybe scavenging for a sulk or a smile. I reached the library door and pushed it open. Nothing had changed, the Persian rug still worn at the edges, the heavy shelves still lined with books Dad never let me touch. In the corner, the portrait of him. I stood beneath it for a moment. Then I noticed the cheek. The scar he always had, gone. It wasn't a great wound, just a faint remnant of his youth. I knew it was there. I was sure. Yet this painting lacked it. That's when I understood the picture that hung at the ceremony wasn't the original. It was a replica. My father used to lean close and say, "In this house they'll even repaint the truth." I swallowed that line again. Tonight, it no longer sounded cryptic. It sounded like prophecy. I moved to my old desk, still in place. I opened the top drawer. Inside, Dad's final birthday card and a brass key. The card read in his careful script, "The real inheritance isn't written in the will. It's what you choose to carry." I felt a cold wave in my chest. I turned the key in a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf, and the wall clicked open. Inside was a small recorder and a journal stamped March 2004. I pressed play. His voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, someone's betrayed you. Trust your instincts, not their apologies." I leaned against the wall. My heart tightening. He knew. He knew before any of us did that something was off, and he left me the trail. I sat on the old bench, listening, reading, thinking. The journal has pages where he wrote about Renly and Vespera, ambition cloaked in loyalty, documents signed that he didn't approve, holes in estate papers he marked. I remembered the night I overheard Vespera crying softly in the hall, "He'll never love me more than that child." I buried the moment, told myself I was imagining it. Tonight I realized it wasn't imagination, it was witness. Walking the gallery of our ancestors, I counted one by one their stoic faces, none of them captured the chaos we carried. And then I saw it, my spot was missing. No portrait of me. They erased me while I was still breathing. I whispered it aloud. I didn't feel silly. I felt resolute. A voice in the hallway stopped me. "Renly. She's still in there?" she asked. I didn't respond. I just stood. I didn't hide. I didn't say hurt. I stood taller. I wrote one sentence in Dad's journal, "I found your voice, and I'll use mine next." I closed the drawer, locked the briefcase I carried and slipped into the quiet corridor. My phone buzzed, brunch at Vespera's. Family only. No excuses. I paused at the threshold of the painted hall. I felt the cool marble underfoot. The odds were shifting. The morning light hit different. Too clean. Too staged. The veranda had been set just right, white linen, orange slices tucked into champagne flutes, napkins folded like swans. It was the kind of setup meant to whisper civility while choking off dissent. The invite had said family only, no guests. That was the first flag. I stepped onto the stone floor, eyes grazing over the pool shimmer and the carefully placed smiles of people who didn't want me here. Vespera stood near the railing in a peach silk dress, sipping from a glass she didn't drink. She waved at me like we were co-stars in a play only she got to direct. "Caroline, you made it," she said, all warmth and no soul. At the head of the table, Mother clasped her hands like she was posing for a portrait. Not a glance of welcome, just expectation. I sat quietly at the far end. Didn't need a sign. The message was already there, know your place. In a room full of relatives, I thought, I've never felt more like a stranger. The clink of cutlery started. Casual laughter floated. The show had begun. Introductions wrapped. Chatter died down. The estate lawyer stood. Some minor updates to the trust were made, he began. I raised my glass, then my voice. Why wasn't this communicated to me earlier? Silence. Then Vespera chirped, without looking up, oh dear, not the charity question again. Scattered laughter. Polite, restrained. I watched the lawyer flinch but continue. He listed names tied to the trust, Vespera, Ellis, others. My name was never spoken. I felt my fingers tighten on the base of the glass. Not rage. Not yet. Just recognition. They weren't forgetting me. They were writing me out in real time. Quietly. Legally. I stepped away, out onto the terrace where the scent of orange blossoms masked the rot beneath. Renly followed. He stood beside me, staring out. He didn't look at me when he said, last night, I saw Mom in the study. She burned something. The words settled in the pit of my stomach. Fire. Paper. Smoke. I'd smelled it but dismissed it. Just another night of cover-up. I nodded, not to him, but to myself. The signs were always there, I just didn't want to believe them. Not from her. Not from them. I walked back to the table like I hadn't missed a beat. Sat down. Picked up my fork. Mask on. The storm inside stayed silent. Then Mother turned to me. Caroline, dear, tell us about your little project. The home restoration, wasn't it? I held her gaze. It's not about brick and paint, I said. Legacy is about truth. The part you don't rewrite. The table went still. Even the servers paused mid-step. Marla smiled with her lips, not her eyes. Ellis shifted in his seat, glanced toward the documents the lawyer had placed on a side tray. That's when I saw it. A file with my name on it, lined out in black pen. Below it, Vespera's. The wind caught a voice from the far end. I didn't see who said it, but I heard it plain as day. She should know her place. I didn't look toward the voice. I didn't rise. I just set my glass down with care. And in that silence, they heard me louder than if I'd shouted. I stood and excused myself. Walked past them like they didn't matter, because now, they didn't. Not in the way they wanted. By the door, I paused and turned toward the wall where Dad's portrait once hung before they replaced it. The space watched me, even without eyes. They warned me, I murmured, voice barely audible. Now I'll carry their warning. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the hallway. Unknown number. One line. Don't attend the gala tonight. It's not safe. I read it twice. Then again. The text kept replaying in my mind. Don't attend the gala tonight. It's not safe. I read it once more, as if the meaning might shift with each glance. Maybe it wasn't a warning, maybe it was bait. But I learned something from years in that house. The most dangerous silence is the one before they strike. So, I went. Not as a guest, not as the lost daughter hoping for peace, but as an observer. A witness. I put on the navy dress. Not flashy, but deliberate. Power disguised as restraint. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see fear anymore. I saw calculation. At twilight, the estate glowed like a mirage. Valets rushed, glasses clinked, laughter floated too easily. When I walked in, no one stopped me. The woman at the reception barely looked up. My name wasn't on the seating chart, again. That used to sting. Now, it only confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't invited to celebrate. I was bait. Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and self-importance. Music swelled. Vespera, of course, owned the room. Her voice sliced through the crowd as she raised her glass. To family, she said sweetly, and to those who stood by us through transition. A large screen flickered to life behind her, videos of her philanthropy, her smiling with orphans, shaking hands at ribbon cuttings. Then I froze. One clip, I knew that scene. The sunlight, the camera angle. I filmed that. Funded it. Wrote every line. But now, her name was branded across it. Mine erased. A man beside me leaned in. Isn't that your voice? I smiled thinly. It was. But they've learned how to dub truth. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His brows knit. The conversation around us went quiet for half a second, long enough for Vespera's eyes to flicker toward me before her smile returned. I didn't give her the satisfaction of reaction. I stepped back into the shadows, away from the crowd. That's when I felt something slip into my hand, a folded note. Renly. He walked past without a word. Don't react tonight. I have something you need to see. My pulse steadied. I tucked the note into my clutch and drifted toward the side gallery. The music softened there, replaced by murmured voices. I turned a corner and caught Ellis talking to the estate attorney. Their words were hushed, clipped. Transfer before quarter-end signatures ready, she'll never see it coming. They didn't notice me, or maybe they didn't care. I'd become invisible to them long ago. I stood there, pretending to study a painting of my father, but I wasn't looking at art. I was connecting dots. The gala wasn't about honoring him, it was the final act in erasing his will. When I stepped back toward the courtyard, Marla found me. She moved like a queen rehearsing mercy, all elegance and hidden knives. "You always make everything harder for this family," she murmured, smiling for the cameras that hovered nearby. "I make things honest," I said. Her eyes flickered, just enough. She leaned closer. "You should know, I sealed your medical records. Told the board it was for your privacy. But it helped, when people started wondering about your stability." Her tone was syrup. The meaning, poison. I felt the ground tilt. She'd used my trust, my history, against me. My own mother. I steadied my breath. "You'll regret underestimating me." The line landed like a slow blade. A guest nearby, a man I didn't know, heard it, his expression shifting. Respect, or pity, I couldn't tell. Either way, Marla's smile faltered for half a beat. That was all I needed. I walked away. Past the chandeliers, the fake laughter, the flash of cameras. No one stopped me this time. Maybe they knew better. The night air outside was colder than it should have been. I slid into the car, shut the door, and for a moment, I just sat there, watching the lights of the estate fade in the rearview mirror. Then I opened Renly's note. 3 words, a location, a time. Midnight. Study room. Come alone. I folded it carefully, placed it in my lap, and stared out into the dark road ahead. "They've played their game for years," I whispered to myself. "Now it's my turn to deal the cards." The night had settled into silence by the time I slipped back into my father's estate, a place meant to intimidate. The long shadows stretched across the leather chairs and the mahogany desk where once my father ruled. The city lights through the tall windows cast ghosts across the room. I carried the note from Renly like a trigger, ready. Inside, on his desk, was the file, Whitmore Holdings Litigation, Confidential. My name faint in the margins, signatures I recognized, names I never expected. I opened the first page and the lines blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from recognition. If this is what I think it is, I've held the proof all along. I steadied my breath, took the tablet I'd hidden, and prepared my move. Hours later, the room felt colder. I skimmed the clause, heart steady but heavy. My father, Vespera, Marla, names tangled in one sentence. A trust fund in my name. A fund they never activated. Instead, the balance flowed quietly, into Marla's shell company. They built me a ghost account, not a legacy. I took a photo, sent an encrypted message to Renly, "It's real. I need your cover tomorrow morning." The words left no margin for doubt. They had changed the equation. From the study I wandered into the kitchen. Late night, quiet. Kitchens don't shout, they whisper. I heard 2 voices, my father's tone firm, Marla's almost sweet. I froze behind the pantry door and listened. "We'll tighten the narrative, remove her influence permanently." The word permanently echoed. It wasn't just exclusion anymore, it was erasure. My fists clenched. My breath caught. If they want to play with ghosts, I'll become the one they're scared of. I pulled out the recorder I'd hidden in my coat pocket. The red light blinked in the gloom, proof. I pressed record. Their voices were sharp, dismissive. "She's just the daughter who does museum tours, irrelevant." I felt something real crack inside me. Years of being background, of being the safe bet no one talked about, folded into a single line. I uploaded the audio to a secure cloud, scheduled the release for noon next day. Shift. The equation changed. My silhouette tracked past the estate spotlights, my face calm, but new inside. By dawn, I sat in my apartment, blowing cold air from the window onto city lights. The tablet read, "Scheduled release, 12 p.m. I glanced at the message from Renly, "Coverage in position. Media loop ready." I felt no panic. Fear had done its work already. I whispered, "I am not the shadow you built. I'm the one who turns on the lights." The notice arrived at 8 o'clock sharp on a Sunday. Special meeting of Whitmore Vale Holdings Board, 10 a.m. No explanation. No attachments. Just the command. I sat with my coffee, watching the morning light over LA, realizing this boardroom was always where decisions about me were made, without me ever really being included. I packed my tablet, notebook, and that flash drive from Renly into my satchel. When I stepped into the main hallway of the estate, I felt the weight of every quiet room I'd left behind, every whisper I'd been excluded from. The meeting wasn't a courtesy, it was a gauntlet. But this time I carried the evidence, not the expectations. I walked up the marble steps and paused for a moment at the door. Then I entered. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, watching Marla standing at the head, Vespera flanking her in calm confidence, Ellis fidgeting near the water carafe. The room smelled of leather chairs and ambition. I tapped my tablet. The lights dimmed. The board chair cleared his throat. "Ms. Vale, we understand you requested today's agenda?" he asked. I looked directly at him and said, "Not requested. I'm enforcing it." A hush sank across the suits and ties. I projected the trust documents onto the screen. There it was, the trust fund in my name, the clause routing every dollar into a shell company with Marla's initials. Gasps fluttered. Marla's practiced smile flickered. I leaned forward. "My father meant for it to support art, not your empire," I said. He wrote it in his journal. Marla's voice trembled. "This is an internal misunderstanding." The attorney's lips parted but no words came. Renly remained silent in the back, his nod subtle. I held the room. The truth will no longer be buried in footnotes. Then the murmurs began. My tablet buzzed. At exactly noon, the audio from the kitchen conversation, the one where my mother dismissed me as just the daughter that does museum tours, irrelevant, went live. Through tinted windows I saw camera flashes. Already reporters were posting. A board member whispered, "We're trending." Marla slammed her palm on the table. "Stop this broadcast now." The echo of my phone's alert filled the wood-paneled room. Vespera's laugh vanished. She didn't meet my eyes. I felt a wave of satisfaction, not joy. Relief. At long last I was no longer a side note. I was the headline. With the evidence public, I leaned back in my chair. The shift had happened. Ellis stood up, voice shaky. "Mother, the legal counsel requests a recess." Marla tried to say something about family business. I answered, "You built a spectacle out of my silence. I'm just telling the truth." The board chair pounded the gavel. Recess. Guests rose in discomfort. Outside the windows I saw crews and flashing lights. The portrait of my father behind Marla looked different now, less idle, more witness. My posture shifted. I realized I had not only exposed them, I invited a transformation. Power doesn't live in titles. It lives in what you dare to reveal when they expect you to stay quiet. Walking down the marble corridor afterward, Renly handed me a small flash drive. "They buried one more deed," he said quietly. "There's an asset in Utah. Your father's signature is still clear." I slid the drive into my jacket pocket. I looked around, panicked assistant starting, cameras blinking through windows. The outside world was watching now. I nodded to Renly and said, "Then we move." They thought I just took a seat at their boardroom table. But I wasn't there to sit, I was there to take control. The grand hall of the estate looked strange. Flashing lights, camera crews milling on marble floors, microphones hung like vines from the ceiling. This was no family gathering. I stepped in wearing charcoal gray, simple and firm. No sparkle. No softness. I meant business. Facing me was Marla at the podium, Vespera beside her holding a folder titled Family Statement, Rolling Media Release. The lacquered wood, the high ceilings, the silent portraits lining the walls, it all felt like a stage built to hide truth. I remembered a line from Audre Lorde, "Your silence will not protect you." I arrived determined to end my quiet. My heart pounded. These people weren't relatives in waiting, they were a tribunal. Mid-speech, the projector behind Marla flickered. The crowd shifted. Then the image changed, suddenly the family portrait melted into view of a hidden compartment. I walked forward. Behind the painted face of my father, the door of the frame slid open. Inside lay his ledger, pages crossed out, names replaced. Shell companies. Undocumented transfers. My trust fund still in my name but inactive. The audience gasped. Marla froze. Vespera's folder slipped from her hand. I picked up the mic. Behind every flawless image lies the distortion no one wants to remember. Cameras pointed. Phones recorded. I showed the ledger. Marla's name at the top. Vespera as primary beneficiary. My claws untouched. This isn't a family legacy, it's an illusion built on my absence. She stammered. Board members muttered. The world tilted. Then the recording played, the kitchen audio. My mother's voice, she's just the daughter who does museum tours, irrelevant. It echoed across the hall. Reporters shifted, cameras snapped. Social media alerts exploded. Ellis stood up, his voice shaking. Mother, we need to pause this meeting. Outside the gates crews waited. Inside the facade collapsed. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a strange sense of relief, because I was no longer hidden. Truth doesn't need applause, but it demands presence. Marla attempted recovery, voice shaking. The Vale family remains committed to stability. I stepped forward, calm. Stability built on a mission is just another cage. The projector flipped to show an original photo of Dad's face with the scar on his cheek, a detail I'd remembered, documented, proof the portrait wasn't original. Press flashes captured every flicker on Marla's face. The boardroom broke into chaos. Security moved to clear press. The estate's veneer cracked. I declared, today, we stop being the exhibition, and become the expose. Walking out, tablet under my arm, the last echoes of cameras trailed. A reporter asked, Ms. Vale, what will you do now? I answered, I'll rebuild from the truth you couldn't hide. My phone buzzed. Flash drive from Renly, Utah deed, midnight release. They shattered their mirror. Now, I'm stepping into the light they feared. The sun rose slowly over the New Mexico high desert, its light filtering through the large windows of my new studio. 2 weeks had passed since everything changed at the Vale estate, the exposure, the confrontation, the boardroom. I stood in the quiet space now, surrounded by blank canvases leaning on rough-hewn walls, paint-spattered floorboards and the scent of fresh turpentine. I inhaled deep and set my brushes aside in their jar. I looked at myself in the lens of a small camera I had positioned for an upcoming video post, and said softly, healing doesn't come from erasing the past, but by redrawing what comes next. My father's words came to mind, truth, like art, requires layering. I understood now that I was the one to build those layers. Then my phone rang, it was Renly on the line. He encouraged me to include the broken family portrait as the final piece of the gallery. I paused and resisted, the idea felt heavy. But after a moment I thought, let them see what we survived. Later that day, a plain envelope was slipped under the studio door. No return address. Inside, a check for $2 million with Memory Claim Trust and the Vale Estate's banking info printed. Also enclosed, my mother's locket bearing our childhood photo, meticulously restored. I held it quietly. The enclosed note read, for what wasn't protected, and what you became regardless. My throat tightened, not because of money, but because acknowledgement had a weight of its own. A handwriting expert would later confirm the note matched Vespera's script, no signature, no apology, just one gesture. I set the locket next to the guest book for the gallery. No more words necessary. In the days that followed, hundreds of letters arrived. War veterans, single mothers, grandparents, people I'd never met. A woman in Ohio wrote, "Your story made me take back my daughter from foster care." A retired teacher said, "We're not invisible, we're just quiet until the right voice breaks through." I read them aloud in my empty studio, letting each sentence settle. Then I laugh softly. You were never my audience. You were my mirror. I made a decision. No fanfare. No admission fee. I would open the exhibition free and open for elders only, first. Just space. Just breath. On opening day they arrived slowly, a woman with a cane, a man escorting his wife, an older couple holding hands. They moved through the gallery with quiet reverence. Each painting named after memory lines, the garden she ignored. The staircase to nowhere. The truth behind velvet. At the end of the hall hung the final piece, the restored family portrait framed amid its broken glass shards, gaps visible, not hidden. People stood, some crying, some touching the frame, some just silent. I sat nearby, not as artist but as someone who listened. One woman leaned in and whispered, "This is what justice looks like when it breathes slowly." When the last guest had left, I walked out into the desert dusk. The sky was broad and deep, colors fading from orange to lavender. I clipped the locket around my neck, gripped the handle of my paintbrush firm. I spoke quietly to myself, to the wind, to what remained. We spend a lifetime waiting for the apology that may never come. But we can still choose what we do with the silence left behind. I stepped onto the trail that stretched from the studio into the wide open land. With each step I felt lighter, grounded in my own story rather than lost in theirs. Some legacies aren't inherited, they're built, brushstroke by brushstroke.